Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for taking your lunch hour to kind of get the updates. And actually, I want to spend a little bit of time at the end of the conversation today. Actually, I want to get some input on a couple of ideas, but we'll kind of unveil all this as we walk through. So this is our October update. I was asked to sort of remind folks that tomorrow from 1 to 3, I think actually in this ballroom, cybersecurity panel. So Tom Sue, and I think that there'll be some featured guests as well. We'll sort of be talking about the ever important topic of security, right? I mean, I'm sure as IT professionals, we all absolutely recognize how important it is and how the target that it's become, certainly within the last couple of years, and how we have to sort of rally institutional resources, right, to protect both our identities and university data. So I wanted to start off today's conversation basically just with sort of an introduction or overview. This is sort of what has happened to date. So 46 IT professionals, so from 4 UGen units, 4 schools have migrated to be part of the UTech team. We're sort of working through the remaining 39 through the balance of the calendar year. So it's been, actually it's been a good process, and it's been a good conversation. And I'm going to sort of unveil as a little later on in the conversation today, sort of what the next phase is that we're shifting into now that we've moved sort of those reporting lines. So the working group that we spent a lot of time learning about and talking about early on sort of identified, remember that huge list of 6,000 plus down to 760, right? Still not a small number, but certainly much smaller than 6,000. And they're sort of working through, right, relocation. And it's you have to appreciate sort of the process, and I'd have to admire the process that they've come up with. So they're not just necessarily moving, but they're really sort of evaluating the opportunity, right? So is it a type of technology or box that it makes sense to move? Could it be virtualized? You know, can things be aggregated? So they're taking a little bit of extra time, I think, to sort of do a little organization before things actually get moved in. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about this is sort of working across the university to develop a skills inventory. I think that's actually in the last stages of being completed, so we'll be introducing that, I'm sure within a month or so. So always important to remember, you know, to remind us goals as far as while we're doing this, right? So it's important, right, first and foremost, to make sure that the university is protected from risk. And one of the things that we have found as we've walked through this, and I think the conversations that we've had, is the risks, you know, not only in the technology realm, right, that we have sort of technologies that deal with, but as we're having the conversations with IT professionals around the university, finding there are a lot of areas where folks are single-threaded. They're the only person supporting that particular business, right, and they're the only person that has that skill. So that also represents a risk that we'll work through as time goes on. You know, basically working through this notion of a consistent IT delivery, right, optimizing our investments, and I think one of the things that we're really proud of to get some early success is providing professional development opportunities for the team. So mission. And this, you know, these are important things we want to continue to sort of keep sort of in, you know, front and center. We support and enhance the academic and research mission, right, of Case Western Reserve. You know, we do that through responsive service and enabling infrastructure, effective administrative systems, and innovative solutions. Right, and our vision, right, it was to become sort of preeminent, right, one of the best, and we certainly have sort of the talent. As I've had the opportunity to get to meet a lot of folks sort of individually, just in like 30-minute segments, I'm really impressed with just the commitment and the experience that a lot of folks bring to the table. So it's going to be really nice to sort of watch how all this sort of blends and see everybody working together as one large organization. Core values, you know, we want to, same thing, we want to keep this out in front of people. this is really sort of the values in which we're build the foundation for the organization. So over time, we're going to be talking about, how do these values get integrated into performance evaluations? How do we make sure that these values are integrated into projects? Melissa's presented an interesting concept that we're considering at the senior leadership level about sort of recognizing folks within the division that sort of embody one of these values or multiples of these values in a particular project or a particular opportunity. So we're going to sort of roll this out over time, but I think we all recognize the importance, right, in an organization to have sort of values that everyone sort of acknowledges and recognizes. Guiding principles, I think we've really held true to these. We've talked about the importance of a culture of we. It's nice to hear sort of other people begin to use that same sort of acknowledgement and recognition and sort of reaching out in many ways to sort of embody that culture as well. This notion of sort of honoring what is, we've had a lot of conversations, Sue and I with senior leaders across the institution, and everyone, rightfully so, right, has responsibilities for their school, right, their college, right, their management center, and I think it's imperative for us as IT professionals to make sure that those specific needs are not only understood, right, but as we sort of move the organization forward, we build the organization in a way that is supported, and those needs are recognized and supported, as we've said from the beginning, not necessarily at the level where they are today, right, but basically at a new level, a new strategic level. And then this notion of a new destination, right? This is a new organization that we're all moving to. We're not sort of taking, parts from across the campus and sort of, globbing them onto a central unit. We're all sort of changing. This has really been our strategy. I think we've held true to this strategy from the beginning, this notion of sort of learning the landscape, and these are continuous. In fact, I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a couple of minutes. Building awareness, building support, right, inviting people to be part of the process, and providing input and providing opportunities for folks to be able to provide input. Engaging people, that's been really strategy from day one. Sort of building further support, having conversations. A lot of what's happening behind the scenes is really trying to understand people's concerns, people's goals, right, and how do we sort of fulfill those as we move forward. Beginning to slowly incorporate changes as the opportunities present themselves, and there's sort of acknowledgement that these would actually move us forward. And then demonstrating and documenting results. That's going to be a conversation that we have started with our leadership team, but this notion of importance of telling stories, right? And you all do a lot of great work every day. Are we building the kind of culture within our organization that we're actually acknowledging that and recognizing it, and not only acknowledging it, recognizing it within UTech, but within the university, right? So the university sort of understands how IT is really strategic and sort of positioning itself strategically to move the university forward. So campus engagement, I'm not going to read through all this, but it's been intentional, right? We've, sort of been very intentional about sort of reaching out. We continue to look for new ways and new opportunities. Now that we're back into the academic year, we're going to be making more of a concerted effort, or a renewed concerted effort, I should say, to meet with the faculty as well. So a lot of the work that was done during the summer, we want to make sure that they're up to speed and that they have perspectives on how some of this is moving forward. So professional development. So this is an area I think that we've kind of said from the beginning that we feel this is important. So we've had sort of individual meetings. Those are things that I've scheduled. I've scheduled open office hours and have met with, I want to say, more than 40 individuals over time, just 30 minutes sort of get to know each other, and I've really enjoyed those conversations. One of the things that's been consistent actually in all those conversations is excitement that people have in the opportunity to meet somebody else on campus that does the same job that maybe they haven't had the opportunity to interact with, right? And sort of shared stories and ways that we might be able to collaborate. This notion of a goal-focused development plan. So we actually asked IT professionals sort of in the distributed areas around the university sort of what their goals were. So what are the things that they would like to achieve? Why is it important? how does it support the university? What are the skills you need, right? How would you obtain those skills, and sort of what the plan is? And so we're in the process of sort of evaluating what opportunities that presents to us. Talked about the skills database. We'll be introducing that shortly. And then the entire management team from UTech across the entire university is moving through a 6-month advanced leaders program. So it's almost like sort of a 2-day pseudo residency where they really kind of get immersed in the topic, and we have sessions planned out through next June. So that and we've gotten good feedback from that. The first session was last week. On the personnel updates, I don't know that there's new information from the last time we met. I know that our colleagues from Weatherhead AV team will be moving in during the month of October, but we're at that 46 number that I had reported earlier, and you can see that we're on schedule to sort of meet the target before the end of the calendar year. We're having conversations with, I think, a half a dozen research chairs within the School of Medicine, just to kind of understand the IT personnel that are in those areas and how do we best position them to support the research mission. Excuse me. Service management. So this has also been a lot of work that's been done. There's a lot of excellent support that's provided from across the university. So we're really trying to assess, like we've done in a lot of the other working groups, is assess what the volume is. What are sort of the challenges? How does the med school provide support differently than how the School of Engineering provides support, right? And sort of making sure that we understand those nuances within the different schools. So we're sort of looking at this information, obviously having data. We want to be a data-driven organization. It's part of the university strategic plan. It's part of UTech's strategic plan. So I think it's important to sort of live that as well. And so how do we use this data? How do we use what we're learning from the services we provide to the campus to find ways to sort of do things better, right? Or to save money or to optimize in some other ways. So we're looking at a new service management platform. That work has been underway. As you can imagine, sort of changing out sort of that tool set is not a small task, and making sure that we have the right requirements in place, so when all that work is completed, the system is actually able to do the things that we need it to do. And then we're looking at sort of optimizing our desk side support strategy. So we're going to be working through that as time goes on. We've got a lot of folks that are really committed to figuring out, what does this look like moving forward. So that's important work that's being done sort of in the service management area. We had a conversation with our leadership team, just a side note, this past week. So we've had an external consultant kind of come in and work with us, and I think many of you may have participated in those conversations. I think one of the things is important is recognizing that the service desk really is the face of UTech, right, to the entire campus. So that's, in many cases, that's the only interface, right, that somebody across the campus has with us as an organization. So we're really vested in the success of our analysts, right, and how we support them with the information that we provide in the way of scripts and knowledge-based articles, and continuing to build and strengthen that relationship. I think in any successful sort of service management enterprise, the connection between sort of the desk, your sort of frontline support, and your users, and then the connection between frontline support and sort of your more experienced, more expertise support personnel has to be seamless in order to be delivered effectively. So we've got a good approach now. We're just working to kind of make it better. So hardware, this is a little bit tough probably to see on this slide. No, it's actually easier to see up here than it is to see on my laptop. Maybe that's just my eyes. Anyway, but we're sort of on targets. We're sort of moving through the process. We've accelerated expectations a bit in order to have this done before the end of the fiscal year. So there's a lot of heavy lifting, right, that has to be done by the engineers and the teams that are sort of working on moving these servers. And there's layers of complexity that I think only they can appreciate, right, when you have to move sort of a set of servers with a complex set of relationships sort of in one IP address range, and you got to move them to another part of campus. So anyway, no, it's really a lot of good work, and it's important work. there's some photos that we've been able to sort of archive. I don't think any of them are in this presentation. It's important space, right, potentially that the university can reclaim, right, and use for other things. And real estate at a university, well, in any organization, right, is expensive. And so if we have the opportunity to reclaim some of that, that's really important. I think the energy savings is also something that is significant as well, especially since as an institution, right, we've made a commitment, right, to sustainability. So being able to optimize, that's part of this whole optimization process that we're talking about. So you can see here's the data on kind of where we're working at right now. So it's interesting, out of the 700 some, we have 126 of them are not under warranty. There's a couple handfuls there where the operating system is no longer supported. So the team has to figure out a strategy, right, to how do we sort of replace the functionality of that machine, and sort of sunset a machine that clearly, represents a fairly significant risk. So there's been 29 physical servers moved, 21, right, that are looking at being shut down, and so you can kind of see the numbers here. So the team is on the front end of a lot of these processes. So there's a lot of things that have to happen before you can sort of move the server or sort of change its configuration. So the teams are really kind of engaged heavily in sort of that aspect of the planning right now. And here's sort of the updates on sort of what's been moved and where. I want to spend some time, save some time for conversation. So I guess before maybe I move on to this section, any questions, comments about anything that a lot of this is already familiar? I think we were just sort of updated numbers, but just wanted to give folks an opportunity to provide any feedback or commentary if they'd like to. Okay, good. So that was, so that's kind of the report hour. I want to try to minimize that, but I think it's important. Okay, we're just returning the mic back. Okay, thanks. So I mentioned this, I think I introduced this back in our last time, the last brown bag, is sort of, we're moving into sort of the second phase of this right now, which up until this point, it was about sort of moving to a new organization, and we kind of had sort of a macro view, right, of sort of what was happening across the institution. And the strategy is somewhat unique, I think, from other sort of centralization activities that are going on around the country, in the fact that we decided it made more sense to move the reporting line and really keep the team intact than to try to do a bunch of optimization before you sort of bring things to a central organization. I'm beginning to think, and just the feedback that we're getting, that this might actually be a pretty interesting approach. So it's not disruptive to you as IT professionals. It's sort of less disruptive to your school because they're still working with the same people, with the same services. Really nothing has changed. And what it does is allow us then to begin to understand sort of what is happening. And so this is really kind of the phase that we're into right now. So we're sort of shifting our focus from sort of macro view, right, into sort of more, we want to look into sort of each of the organizational units, really, and kind of understand how they're unique, right, how they're special, what are the expectations of the school. So in our organizational development faculty, sort of this notion of sort of socio-technical culture, right, is kind of what we need to measure, and we need to look at so that we can articulate how the dental school is different from the School of Engineering, different from the college, and then how we sort of position the IT professionals within that group to really free them up to innovate. So I was talking to a couple of folks this week, and I think it's important to emphasize now at this stage, this notion is that innovation sort of at the edge. So how do we free up the IT professionals that are in each of the schools to kind of focus on the very unique needs, right, within that school? How do we create capacity in order to be able to do that? So everyone that I've talked to has said, that we could be doing a lot more, or we don't have enough resources. We could be doing a lot more than what we're doing. So we're going to really spend some time looking through this. And so there's going to be really 4 ways we're going to think about this. So one is the service offerings. So this is just articulating the service catalog, right, that exists in each of the schools. This work has already started. Actually, a lot of significant work has been done in this area. So we actually have a sense of who's offering the same services, who's offering unique services, and really kind of get a snapshot of that from across the institution. Skills assessment, we talked about. I think the other aspect of this that's important is professional goals. So we want to have a sense of where do our IT professionals sort of see themselves moving in their careers, right? How as we as leaders kind of help them develop, right, and sort of pursue those opportunities. And so I think the other aspect is, as we talk about this, if we create capacity for innovation, we're going to need folks with new skill sets, right, with sort of new talent. And so if we can identify folks that really, it's like, yeah, I want to sort of take that next step, or I'm ready, or this is kind of where I want to develop, it's in the best interest of the institution to help folks acquire a new set of skills so that they can help us sort of solve new problems, right, or help researchers or teaching faculty in a new way. We're going to look at the projects. This has always been part of the conversation, right? There's always more work than what there are people, right, or sort of, you know, resources. So we need to get a sense of what does this look like, right? What are all the projects that everyone's working on? And we're going to have to figure out over time, right, how to prioritize and how to sort of enable this and to make sure that we're responsive in the way that the institution needs us to be responsive. And then the last area is user experience. So there's an interesting concept that I've been thinking about, this notion of a, it's called a journey map. Actually, one of our faculty, Youngjin Yu, was sort of describing this to me, and that basically it sort of maps out by constituent all the times that, you know, so you sort of outline their experience. So say we take an undergraduate student first year, you know, we go from the time that they've applied to the time that they've basically, you know, finished their first year, and you sort of map out what happens, and you sort of map out all the touch points, right? So where do they touch technology, right, in that journey? And then you sort of look at all those touch points and you kind of get a sense of, okay, you know, what's the quality of the service delivery? Is it cohesive? Is it understood? Is it an opportunity to make improvement? So these are things that we'll sort of look at because it's important for us to understand, right, what are the needs of that school? We have to understand what the expectations are of the users in that school. So it's really in many ways sort of using a design thinking approach to service optimization. Okay, so enough of sort of the updates, and so I wanted to kind of get into this and sort of talk a little bit about this model and kind of get some feedback from you all. So this pyramid actually was done originally, I think, by a consultant that was supporting University of Michigan. It was adopted by WashU recently, who's been doing some work around centralization. I think it provides an interesting sort of model, and it would be interesting to kind of get your feedback, right, to sort of talk through this as a way to, I don't say compartmentalize, but sort of bucketize the services that we provide. Here's why I think this is important. So as we're talking to folks and as we're assessing the needs across the campus, we're finding sort of two types of services. Right, we have services that are highly specialized, right, so for example, the dental clinic, right, the dental clinic is the only school, right, that has a clinic, and they have very special needs, and therefore they need not only very specially trained IT professionals, but an infrastructure. And at the same time, there's also commodity type services that are offered as well. And so we need to kind of understand how they're different and how they're unique. And so this kind of provides an interesting sort of framework. So the thought is, as we collect the services, we sort of map them into one of these buckets. And so starting from sort of the bottom of the pyramid moving up, common good, so everyone at the university essentially consumes this service. So the network, right, would be sort of a common good service. The wireless network would be a common good service. Next layer on top of that is sort of community good. SIS, right, would be a good example of a community good. So it's not used by the entire campus, it's used by a portion of the campus. And then you sort of move up a little more specialized toll good. High performance computing would be sort of a good example of sort of toll good. So it's used across the campus. It's used sort of very, I don't want to say sporadically, but it's used in very specialized way by a distributed group of colleagues, if you will. And then last is this mission unique. So the dental clinic was probably the best example of that. So yeah, I'll maybe spend a little bit of time, and we could do this one or two ways. We could either just do it as sort of an open conversation, since there's not that many of us here, or if you would feel more comfortable to sort of talk about it at your tables. But kind of give you a little bit of time to sort of absorb this and kind of think about the services that are in your particular area or that you represent. do they fit, right, sort of in one of these categories? And even just thoughts about the model. So as an academic institution, right, we kind of like to use models, right, to sort of understand things from an organizational perspective. So I'll give you a few minutes to kind of absorb and sort of think about it if you want to talk about it, but yeah, I'd be really interested in your feedback. Okay. I'm actually, so we can, no, this is good. It seems like this conversation approach is better. So just curious, what the table, sort of what topic are you kind of gravitating towards in your conversation?
For us, we were kind of, oh hey. For us, we were talking with Hadrian about research computing, because marketing is a different kind of animal, and it doesn't really fall into these. But
well, it falls in all of them.
Right. But we were talking about the research that these guys do and how they fall between a toll good and a community good, and then how do you really define yourself? Like, what do we call less predictable?
Right.
That was a question.
Good. Yeah. Well, and it's like any model, right? There's a level of subjectivity, and it's not going to be 100%. So where does it best fit? And it's really just more about sort of understanding and organizing. So how about the table back here? Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Matt.
Well, last time I did this, it barked back at me. So we talked about trying to categorize the services, and how do you do that? Is it used versus the outcome of the service? So we talked a little bit about HCM, right? So a lot of people get paid out of HCM, a lot of paychecks, postdocs. They don't enter time though. They don't go in it on a regular basis. But the outcome is how do you categorize a service like that? Is it use of the service, or is it the outcome it provides to the campus, the number of people? Tom talked a little bit about what the radio station and a receiver for the radio station, particular to a certain group. Anyone could get that frequency and listen to it, but it's really just set up for a specific group.
Sure.
We also talked about what is the outcome of putting these into these categories or layering these? Is it to determine the benefit and the cost model of where you're prioritizing, where you're putting resources based upon the mission unique versus the common good, and what's the I think Tom used the cost per pound of a car. So the benefit and the cost per pound of a car. Are we going to assess the outcome of the cost per of each service and the number of people that it benefits? So
ultimately, I think it would be really good information. I think we could actually benefit from sort of having an understanding of what does it actually cost the university to provide a service. There's quite a ways to get to that point, but it's like any business, right? You want to sort of understand how you're sort of using your resources, right, to support to support the business, and are we using them in a way that's optimized, right? So, and we can't optimize what we don't know. So I think it's critically important, right, to have this data so that as we're trying to make improvements incrementally, we have something to measure them against, right, and have something to report. So thoughts, though, maybe throw this out to this notion of sort of use versus outcome. Anybody have sort of reactions or sort of thoughts to sort of the conversation this table regarding sort of if you compare those two, and maybe Matt, maybe provide the illustration again, since we're kind of asking folks to think about it. The notion of the use of it as opposed to sort of the outcome, or what sort of the output that it produces.
Well, I use the example of HCM, where not everyone goes into HCM. Not all the people around campus are required to go into HCM and enter time, but a broader group of people get benefits out of it, get paychecks out of it. So if something with that service is down, it may just be impacting a couple people, but the outcome is, 4,000 or 5,000 people don't get their paycheck. So that's the outcome.
Okay, good. No, thanks.
Yeah, we thought of something similar, which is that when we think of a product, and we were talking about, for instance, Office, that there is a layer of Office that all of us use and has an outcome for all of us. And then there are very sophisticated parts to it, which we don't, which very few, which very few people use. And so a little like HCM, that we may want to rethink what is the service, what is the common good service that we supply, as opposed and support, as opposed to the specialized community good, mission unique kind of services that are provided out of that same platform.
Good. Yeah, so we'll have to come up, right, sort of answer these questions, right? We'll have to kind of come up with a framework, because there's a lot of services that are offered across the campus. So if we want to sort of organize these consistently, we have to have a framework that we're all sort of basing it on. So that's work that's going to still have to be done. And so, we've talked over the months about opportunities to get involved, getting some good folks together to think about, okay, what does a framework look like for kind of determining where this fits? So how about the table back here, what we all sort of talk about?
We were comparing that our groups are unique. The School of Medicine, we're probably the only school that supports our students' hardware. They come in with laptops, and we currently support that, and I don't think anybody else does that. We also service all of the hardware for our staff and faculty as well. And I'm not sure if the other schools do that part either, or if it goes someplace centrally.
No, this is good. I think it's important, right? So I think we're all actually learning about some insight, right, into different services that maybe haven't been part of the conversation. So I think it's good to actually to know that and to define it. Terrence, were you going to say something?
You mentioned something about. Thank you. We were talking about programs or applications that the university incents their use. Where would you categorize applications that are commonly used, but the university is hoping to deprecate them and not promote
Can you think of an
those?
Example?
As a matter of fact, I don't.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if that
Can
was.
anyone think of an example? No, sorry. I'm trying to think of something enough. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have a
Sure.
mailing list application
Sure.
that's very commonly used.
So I think one of the things that's important about this is, so beyond sort of categorization, is it helps you think about life cycle, right? Which is really something we should be thinking about, and this notion of sort of planned obsolescence, right? And how do we, same thing, so in optimizing universities' investments, right, we have to understand sort of life cycle, right? And sort of the investments that we make. And at what point do the investments that we make sort of to kind of keep a technology alive sort of outweigh what it would actually cost to move to a new technology, right? Or when do we position ourselves to maybe leapfrog, right, into a new area, then to kind of keep something sort of legacy. So it even goes back to the data conversation, right? So are we collecting the right information, right, as IT leaders to kind of give us insight into those types of decisions? Right. So we've had a lot of good folks over the years that have kind of a good sense and a little bit of a crystal ball because of their expertise to kind of get a sense of where the industry is going. But it's the same thing. It's like anything else that we do. How do we continue to sort of get better at it?
We were also talking about the School of Engineering's Citrix service and how it's a community good service. It's a distinct group that uses it.
Right. Yes.
So.
Good. Yeah, and that's why. A lot of this work will be done sort of in your units. So I know next couple of conversations that I'll have with the technology directors will be to sort of talk about beginning to sort of collect this information. How about this table here?
We had a lot of the same types of conversations about where do things fall, and having common understanding about how to determine that.
Right.
We talked a little bit about how where they fall may influence how they are funded.
Yes.
And then I think as the conversations in the room were happening, I was also thinking about how technologies may move between categories over time. So it's not a static classification.
Yeah, that's a great point. No, yes, absolutely. So innovation and scale, right, sort of follows that. Yeah, I'm sure we could all sort of think of examples, right, where something started as an idea or a pilot. We built it. It's like, wow, this works, and all of a sudden we have to think about, wow, how do we scale it, right, for the entire campus? So no, that's a terrific example. How about the table here?
I think we covered a lot of that, especially we went back and forth about the scale and how things change based on service expectations. And the Office was a big part of that, because in Office you can have Excel sheets that are so complicated with macros that are custom coded that's mission unique. And also, like Access, you can have custom code. Even with Word, you can have stuff that goes to SQL servers and pulls mail merges and does all kinds of things that are really mission unique. Even though Office is
Right. It's a part of
is a service
Right.
for the whole university. And even if we got away with Office, we still have the Google Docs, which is the same exact things, and you can interact with the Google APIs with special code that are available to us that only the school or department would know, but it's a service that's for everybody.
Right.
So at the level of no one else would probably know what those customizations were, even
Right.
though it's a commodity. And we could see those any kind of commodity or service going both ways, depending on what the service level expectations were for any school or department and for the university.
Yeah, boy, this is good. No, this is terrific feedback. I'm really glad we're having this conversation, because that kind of gives us stuff to think about that perhaps we haven't discussed. And yeah, my screensaver kicked in. So let me ask you at a high level, does the model sort of make sense? Does it kind of resonate with you as you think about it? Yeah, everything's not going to fit cleanly. It's a model. In fact, in some ways, you could almost think of it as a continuum as opposed to 4 layers, right? And sort of things kind of fit in between, as we recognize. And I think as even folks have pointed out, so you could have a service that's provided that's mission unique, right, that relies on infrastructure that's common good. Right, so I think that helps sort of understand those relationships, and I think even from a technology standpoint, sort of change control. So do we actually understand when we're doing something with the infrastructure, what actually all is it going to impact? I don't know that we necessarily have all the visibility that we'd like to have these days, and sort of understanding that. So that all has to kind of be worked through and documented. Could anyone think of service that didn't fit in this at all? Because we want to try to use, right, I mean, when you're using a construct, right, you want to use something that's at least reasonably solid. Tom?
In the past, we've done projects that seem to serve the community outside the university. So my question would be is things that we do with our affiliated institutions.
Sure.
Like CIM, maybe the art museum, some overlap in the community. Is that inside the scope or outside the scope? Like Case Guest is a good example.
Right.
People come here, they're not.
What do you think? Well, yeah, I'd be interested to hear sort of people's perspectives on that. What do you think, Tom? Because you like anything, you could sort of argue it any number of ways.
I think it shouldn't be our primary focus. It should be specifically from a support model. You know, if Case Guest isn't working for somebody, obviously we want performance, but it's something we provide just to make things a little better or easier.
Sure.
The specific example I have is that somebody wanted to allow their auditors visiting the department Case wireless accounts, and they would want to go through the rigmarole of creating affiliate accounts for them so they could log in. And I said, use Case Guest. You know, how much work do we do? You know, that was a common good that went right up to mission unique.
Sure.
And I think if we think about where our boundaries are, we avoid trying to apply this to the whole Northeast Ohio area.
Right. No, that's a good point. You know, the other thing that it brings to mind, Tom, besides the point that you're making about this, is the. Of course, I lost my train of thought. I was kind of diverted a little bit, but it related back to something that I was talking about earlier. And we'll see if it comes back. So just going back to your point, though, yeah, I think we have to kind of understand sort of where it fits and how it supports. And it goes back to that whole sort of life cycle sort of analysis. So we know visitors to campus, right, are a stakeholder that comes. So do we understand their touch points, right? So is the technology that we've deployed to support our guests, have we actually taken the time to sort of map it out and understand what those interactions look like? So to your point, how do we optimize support? How do we optimize the technologies, right? So it allows them to do the things that they need to do as a guest with sort of maybe nominal support, right? Or certainly not the same support model that we might offer a different member of the community. Yeah, I think those are things that I think come up in that type of analysis.
I think that Case Quest is not the only kind of thing we do, which is maybe doesn't serve ourselves. We do things that serve the community in other ways. And so trying to measure it by use by a distinct community of ourselves may not be the only way in which it is helpful. So we've done things in coordination with the city of Cleveland before.
Well, I think it's
neighbor.
but it's consistent with our mission as an institution. I mean, so we have, you know, it's part of the mission of the institution, right, to engage and to serve the community. So it depends on just how you frame it, right? So even if you remember President Snyder's note to the campus, so our response to supporting the RNC was really the notion of being a good civic citizen. So there was a lot of work that was done from an IT perspective, right? That categorization sort of aside, you could apply that model a little more sort of loosely. So that's why I say it's a construct, right? So it's not going to apply 100% of the time. And as long as you're consistent with how you're interpreting the data that goes into it, then it's a useful tool. At least that's kind of what I'm trying to vet out here. Other thoughts? Just looking at time here.
We think we're into the same situation where we have people that are case employees but also work for like UH.
Like they're professors,
Right.
and they're located in a particular hospital, Cleveland Clinic, VA, and they need to get access rights back to case. And that's always a challenging thing to help them get to the data that they need.
Right. And I think, I think same thing. So using this notion of kind of a journey map to understand the fact that we have, you know, defining what is on campus, right, and sort of is something we've had to deal with, especially over time where there are tools that allow folks to be able to work remotely, right? Sort of changes the definition of campus. And so are our services designed in such a way that allow people to use the services that we offer despite the fact that they may not physically be here?
I think also from my point of view in engineering is we often have to facilitate research between institutions, and some of the common good that we do plays a direct role into our corporate partnerships when they come here. And there's benefits that are not direct dollar benefits but turn into dollar benefits when we do research partnerships and engineering and stuff like that because of the common good that we're doing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Good. All right. So a lot of good conversation. I'm trying to be just cognizant of time here. So, and the fact that we give people a chance to get back from their lunch hour. So by and large, I'm not hearing sort of a ton of pushback, but think about this and you know, sort of talking about it amongst your peers, and sort of I would welcome any feedback on the model. So this is generally the construct, and so you kind of get a sense, if nothing else from today's conversation, now we're sort of shifting, right, sort of this whole initiative kind of into a new mode, right, and what we really want to do is sort of understand what's happening, right, in all the specialized units around the campus. And so, you know, then sort of the phase subsequent to that is then we start thinking about organizational models, right? Where are there opportunities to optimize, right? Where are there opportunities to gain capacity? Those are things that we'll have to think about. Where are there opportunities to offer sort of targeted professional development, right, for people who sort of want to sort of mature their skills kind of into a new area. So you can kind of understand why it all, you know, hopefully this all kind of fits together. So, all right. So just to wrap up, any other sort of comments, questions, concerns about anything in general? Matt?
Just have a question. Melissa's here, and Mike, you're here as well. The good work communication that went out this morning, what's the distribution channels for that? And Is it going to be monthly, and is there a deadline for submission by month for that?
We're hoping to do it on a monthly basis, you know, to get that good news and good information out there. And it was something actually Sue and Ginny started kind of putting together, and then we were able to, you know, compile the list and get some, you know, really positive things out there. So yeah, there really isn't a deadline. We'll try to get them out monthly. But please share with me. My email's in there, as well as Ginny's email is in there, and together we'll kind of try to do this on a monthly basis.
Right.
It goes to our staff. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So one of the things that I think it's important for us to emphasize, and remember, communication has been part of one of the areas that we were trying to emphasize as an organization, and we've talked with sort of the management and leadership team about this, is the ability to tell stories, right? I think I mentioned it earlier in my comments, right? Recognizing the fact that there are significant things that are going on across the university, right? Sort of by IT professionals. We need to capture those stories, right? And we need to sort of communicate those. And I think there's two reasons. You know, there's one is the fact that, you know, we need to help the administration sort of understanding how IT is really kind of serving the institution, right? And if we never say anything, then right, we have there's sort of no sort of comeback or response if there's a perception other than kind of what we intend it to be. The other is related to the strategic plan. So we have a strategic plan. We have a number of activities that are going to be kicking off, right, in order to support the strategic plan. We need to be able to capture the activities, right, that are supporting those initiatives, and make sure that those are reported as well. Because there was a lot of good work that was put in the strategic plan, a lot of great feedback from the campus. We have a responsibility to communicate back to the campus what we're doing with all that information. So, great.
Even though we sent it out to the UTech staff, we're using it to start communication, the conversations with UMC. You know, we knew what we were doing with cybersecurity awareness, and now they're going to do a future story. You know, same with the launch of Canvas. So we are using it as a conversation starter with UMC to kind of share that information as well.
Great. All right. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.